In here, we want to question you about a lot more things, but we have some latest updates that are coming in with respect to the Vijay Mallya case. What we are picking up now that's breaking is that the UK court has issued an enforcement order in favor of a consortium of 13 banks. The UK court has ordered to recover the funds that are owed to the consortium of 13 banks by Vijay Mallya. That's the latest that we have coming in. So a big reprieve to all of these PSU banks who had loaned out hefty sums of money. This is coming in favor of all of these banks, and this was owed to them by beleaguered liquor baron Vijay Mallya, who is currently fighting extradition in India on the fraud and the money laundering charges, which are worth nearly 9,000 crore rupees. My colleague Ashwin Mohan now joins in with more details, and clearly this order is going to grant permission to the UK High Court, Ashwin, to enter a lot of these properties and pay back a lot of the banks.
That's right, Aman. This is indeed one of the biggest breakthroughs as far as the entire Vijay Mallya versus the Indian banks case is concerned. Remember that he has been absconding for quite a while now, and there is this case that has been heard by the UK court, and now we're given to understand that the UK court has issued an enforcement order in favor of the consortium of 13 Indian banks, and these are the banks who are seeking to recover funds from the beleaguered liquor baron, who has in fact left Indian shores and is also fighting money laundering charges worth 9,000 crore rupees. Now, what's really interesting, according to the information that we have at this point of time, Avan, is that this order also grants permission to the UK High Court Enforcement Officer to enter Vijay Mallya's properties in Hertfordshire near London. Now, that is the permission that we are given to understand has been given to the UK High Court Enforcement Officer, and it also permits the officer and his agents to enter a few other properties of Vijay Mallya. However, one needs to keep in mind that banks have the option to use this order as one of the means to recover estimated funds, and these funds are around 1.145 billion pounds. So this is a huge breakthrough as far as the entire case against Vijay Mallya is concerned, because at the end of the day, if the UK authorities had to act against him, if the UK authorities had to seize his assets, then they needed a legal nod from a legal forum over there, and that preliminary legal nod, at least on the face of it, seems to have come in from a UK High Court judge. And this is definitely going to be very positive as far as the entire case against Vijay Mallya is concerned, because at the end of the day, Mallya was taking protection under the fact that there was no order against him. This clearly now will open the floodgates, and all the enforcement officers, along with the major enforcement officer and his regulatory authorities, can now enter the premises of Vijay Mallya. It remains to be seen, though, whether the banks will use this as an option to recover the funds. That's something that has been made very clear. So this is a flexibility that has been given to the banks, Avan, as of now. A big breakthrough as far as the entire Mallya probe is concerned.
Right, a big breakthrough clearly coming in. Many thanks, Ashwin, for giving us all of those details. And just to, give you a bit of a recap, this order is going to, as Ashwin said, permit the officer and his agents entry into the properties of Vijay Mallya, where he is currently based. It's not an instruction to enter, which means that the banks have the option to use the order as one of the means to recover an estimated funds of close to 1.1 billion pounds. So clearly, this is a big breakthrough, and a lot of experts are talking about how this latest order as well grants permission, should it be required, while the banks will be considering all the enforcement options that are available to them. So clearly, a big victory coming in for the 13 Indian banks. Remember, we're talking about a lot of marquee PSU banking names like SBI, Bank of Baroda, Corporation Bank, Federal Bank, PNB, United Bank, UCO Bank, etc. All of these banks, this comes as a major relief to some of these banks. And remember, just recently you had Vijay Mallya, who made an application in the Court of Appeal seeking permission to appeal against the order, and that as of now remains pending. So this too comes as a major setback against Vijay Mallya. Gopal Jain is with us on the phone line. Thank you so much, sir, for joining in on the show. This is coming in as a big relief for the 13 Indian banks, but as a big setback for Vijay Mallya. The UK court has issued an enforcement order in favor of the consortium of banks, asking Vijay Mallya to pay up the funds that are owed to the consortium. How are you reading into this latest development? Mr. Jain, is my voice reaching you? Unfortunately, we seem to have disconnected that line. And Ashwin, just walk us through, basically how much of a relief this is coming in for the banks, because it's a huge sum of money that we're talking about.
Aman, this is a consortium of around 13 Indian banks. So it's the likes of State Bank of India, Bank of Baroda, Federal Bank, Punjab National Bank, Bank of Mysore, UCO Bank, a whole host of them. So it's a big consortium that will benefit from this order that has come in from the UK High Court. And essentially what it gives the banks is that it gives the banks the flexibility to enforce the judgment against Mallya's assets in England as well as Wales. So these are the jurisdictions which are covered by this UK High Court judgment. And let's also keep this in, let's also not forget the fact that recently Mallya had made an offer, and he had made an offer to settle the entire case. He had said that he has requested the court to allow him permission to sell all these assets under judicial supervision. And he had also thrown the ball in the court of the Indian authorities, saying that if the ED, which is the Enforcement Directorate, and the CBI object to the proposal, then that's clearly an indication that perhaps this is an agenda against him. So he has thrown this ball back in the court of the enforcement authorities. He had made this offer, and it's very important to note that it's on the backdrop of this that this order has come in from the UK High Court, Avan.
I believe Senior Lawyer Supreme Court is with us right now. Thank you for taking time out and joining in, sir. Would just like to get in your views, because this is a major breakthrough in the Vijay Mallya case, with the UK court now issuing an enforcement order in favor of the consortium of the 13 banks. How would you read into this development?
Well, this is a major victory for the banks, and kudos to the British judicial system, in which such a speedy resolution has taken place. It's an excellent way of settling the matter, since he was also interested in settling after the banks are able to recover the money from the properties which are located in the UK. If there is any balance, they can again negotiate, and hopefully there will be a resolution to the entire problem.
Right, Mr. Tulsi, this is Ashwin Mohan here from the ET Now Mumbai office. Stay on with us, sir. We'll require more of your perspective as we continue to dissect the impact of this breaking news. We're also joined by senior lawyer Gopal Jain. Gopal, do you agree with Mr. Tulsi's view? Big relief coming in for the banks. Finally, they have the flexibility to move against Mallya and also recover their dues by entering his properties and his assets in England and Wales.
Yes, absolutely. It's a big victory, and I think it was a matter of time, but happening sooner rather than later is what is important, because you ultimately want to have an enforceable order, and that's what has come. And B, I think the swift way in which things move is also a good message that in our proceedings now, which India has initiated here and under the new IBC, I think if we also move swiftly, if the system moves swiftly, I think that's very important, because timing is really critical to these things, and having enforceable orders and finishing proceedings is a really important milestone to be achieved, particularly when it comes to public money.
Mr. Tulsi, at the end of the day, we must also not forget that Mallya is facing extradition proceedings in the UK court, and I understand that he will return for his extradition hearing at the Westminster court on July 31st, when closing arguments are expected from the Crown Prosecution Service. Do you think this is perhaps the best possible opportunity for the banks to utilize this judgment and seize his assets now that they have the legal nod?
Yes. And you see, speed is the essence of justice, and the speed with which the UK courts have made this order will perhaps contribute in a big way in resolution of the total controversy. And extradition may be necessary, may not be necessary. If the banks are able to recover the amounts, then we needn't go for his blood.
Right, Mr. Tulsi and Mr. Jain, stay on with us. We're also joined by senior corporate lawyer H.P. Ranina on this big breaking news that has come in from London. Mr. Ranina, the UK High Court has in fact issued an enforcement order in favor of a consortium of around 13 banks against Vijay Mallya, giving them the permission to in fact enter the properties and seize the assets if required as part of the recovery proceedings. How big a breakthrough do you think this is, sir? Because, the progress has been, slow and painful as far as any good news for India is concerned in this case.
No, this is, I think, a tremendous setback for Mallya and a great victory for the Indian banks. At least they'll be able to collect whatever they can. The process has now started. Of course, it will take time, but the process has now started. I think this is very good news for the Indian authorities. Even people like Nirav Modi will now learn a lesson from this. So I think it's a very good thing in development, and I'm glad that the UK court is now taking a tough stand.
Mr. Jain, do you agree with do you agree with Mr. Ranina, because he says that this kind of an order could have a ripple effect on some other cases? Remember, Vijay Mallya is not the only businessman who's absconding from India and facing serious charges of money laundering. You also have Mehul Choksi and Nirav Modi. Could this perhaps have any persuasive impact on the other two cases as well, where the authorities are, hot on the heels of both Mehul Choksi as well as Nirav Modi?
Look, I think the most important thing is it shows that in this system, the final verdict will come speedily, swiftly, and in favor of the banks. Using football phraseology, since the World Bank is on, it's like a winning goal. The Indian banks have scored a winning goal. If they can do it against one, why not they can do it against the others as well. But it's not that this order will trigger the other orders. This order sends a message that the system will very quickly get to a person who's a defaulter or a fugitive, whatever the case is. The law is enforced quickly and speedily. I think that's the takeaway for the Indian banks, and that will embolden them to strike harder, and the person against whom the proceedings are initiated will look at this order to think, well, this could happen to me as well. So I think that's the positive takeaway.
Right, Mr. Jain and Mr. Ranina, please stay on with us, because we now have a very special guest joining us, and he knows more about this case than he knows more about this case because he's been personally involved, because he has been the SBI counsel in this case at various judicial forums. Mr. S. Naganan, thank you so much for taking out time and joining us on this breaking news as far as the UK High Court order is concerned. Big victory, sir, for the State Bank of India.
I think it's definitely a positive step. It certainly shows that the rule of law prevails in India and in other parts of the world, especially in the UK. Because here is a person who suffered an order and who's playing ducks and drakes with the law enforcement agencies, with recovery agents, everybody. I think this is a shot in the arm where the UK court has now recognized the fact that the order of the tribunal is enforceable, and for that purpose, the law enforcement agencies in the UK would aid and assist and enable seizure of assets belonging to this person. I think it's certainly a step in the right direction.
Mr. Nagaran, this is the granting of permission, and if required, the banks can take this route, though of course there are several enforcement and recovery options available to them. What ideally do you think would happen now? What would be the next step from the bank's point of view?
I think, you see, both in India and elsewhere, the bank has taken every step and measure and adopted every legal means to ensure that the order of the Debt Recovery Tribunal is enforced. So the banks have gone to the recovery officer, got orders made, and wherever recovery officers' orders were challenged, they have been resisted both in the High Court and elsewhere. And monies which could possibly be attached and brought to court and court jurisdiction, that has been done. Monies which are lying in deposit, we are trying to ensure that that is available for adjustment. So this is one more step. I think it will enable the banks to go against his assets, which are now kept in overseas jurisdiction, particularly in the properties that are mentioned in the order. The order, I think, refers to 2 properties which belongs to him and where he is there. And it enables them. It's something like an attachment, permission to attach movable properties.
Mr. Naganan, what do you make of this order in the backdrop of what has recently been initiated from Vijay Mallya's end? He has made an offer saying that he is seeking permission from the courts that his assets can be sold under judicial supervision, and then the creditors can be repaid. And if this offer is not accepted by the enforcement authorities, then it's very, very clear that they're not serious, and this is just a vendetta against him to call him the poster boy as far as the Indian NPMS is concerned. How important do you think, in the backdrop of an offer that has just recently been made by Vijay Mallya, and quite publicly at that?
Actually, I would say that offer is not a bona fide one for this reason. You see, the offer is made by him in a proceeding against, winding up proceeding against the United Breweries Holdings Limited. UBHL was one of the guarantors for this loan. Loan was granted to Kingfisher Airlines. Both UBHL, which was then controlled by Mr. Mallya, and Mr. Mallya were the guarantors. So the Debt Recovery Tribunal went into the whole gamut after a full defense, came to the conclusion that the order has to be granted against all of them. And that order was granted. And till today, there is no stay order against that order. Now, in the middle, what happened was the banks also filed a winding up petition against UBHL, saying that it is unable to pay its debts and has become insolvent. That was hotly contested. And after 2 levels of adjudication in the High Court came to the conclusion that insolvency was proved, and a winding up order was passed against UBHL for failure to pay this Debt Recovery Tribunal awarded amount. Against that order, an appeal was filed before the division bench of the Karnataka High Court, and the matter is pending before the division bench. And in those proceedings, which really don't relate to Dr. Mallya personally, he has filed an application saying that there are some assets belonging to UBHL which are subject matter of various proceedings, and those assets must be permitted to be sold, and by that process, some sum of money will be realized. Now, you see, the whole thing is some kind of a subterfuge, because the assets against which not only the banks, but also other law enforcement agencies, money laundering authorities, enforcement directorate, all of them are chasing those assets. And under the law, if anything is the proceeds of money laundering or a crime, that is liable for confiscation. So by this application, what he's trying to do is he's trying to use the backdoor methodology to stall the recovery proceedings and all those other proceedings. And of course, the bank is, I think they haven't yet opposed it formally by filing any pleadings, but I suppose that they will oppose that application, in which event when the matter comes before the High Court, it will be pointed out to the High Court that this is all just kite flying. There's nothing in this.
Right, Mr. Nagaran, the short point that you're making is that the recent offer for settling the case that Vijay Mallya made has no bona fide, and in fact is mere kite flying. That's the claim that is coming in from S. Nagaran, the SBI counsel. Mr. Gopal Jain, do you think, after this verdict, do you think this perhaps strengthens the ground for the Indian authorities, because there is a parallel extradition hearing also going on? So, Mr. Jain, do you think this now puts the Indian authorities on a firmer footing as far as pushing for Mallya's extradition is concerned?
Well, I think that will be determined by, the law relating to extradition. It doesn't have a direct bearing, but, in the overarching proceedings against him, this, as we said, is one positive and decisive step in favor of the Indian banks. I'm sure it will be cited in use, but it will not be a deciding factor insofar as extradition is concerned, because the test, the criteria, the law is different.
What could be the next legal strategy as far as Mr. Vijay Mallya is concerned, Mr. Jain? What's the reprieve from here? This is an order that has come in from a UK High Court judge. Clearly, he can appeal this order at a higher forum, can't he?
So he's obviously, person will challenge, and there are legal remedies. But unlike in India, it's not easy to challenge these orders in England and other jurisdictions. And it comes at a heavy cost if you do it, if you lose. So it's not as simple as litigating in India, saying, I keep litigating and go to the very end and then start again. And the moment you have an order like this, the banks can start taking coercive recovery proceedings for enforcing the orders which they have. So I think he'll now find it very difficult. He's a bit of in a spot and in a corner, if I may say so. And things are catching up with him. As Mr. Nagaran said, he's had a huge lease of life. He's now tried to play this gambit of saying that I'm willing to settle. But I think it's a bit too late in the day, because now the legal process has reached finality and enforcement will start. And I think once enforcement against assets and accounts and attachments starts, that's when you begin to feel the actual pain of the order. Otherwise, it remains an order on paper. So now I think he'll have to take a strong dose of painkillers.
Mr. Jain and Mr. Naganand hold on with us. We also have Mr. Ranina who spoke to us earlier. Mr. Ranina, what do you make of the peculiarities of this case? Because here you have a businessman who's absconding, who owes thousands of crores to a consortium of Indian banks. Then he moves to London. Most of the prime properties and assets are allegedly overseas. Don't you think this is perhaps one of the biggest challenges? Because we are talking about overseas assets and trying to recover money from those overseas assets, and therefore the regulatory uncertainty is always there in a case like this, right?
No, it is true, but at the same time, we must keep in mind that in overseas, things move much faster. The courts of abroad will take a quicker view than the courts in India. So in a sense, it is a blessing in disguise, because if we can get orders to recover those overseas assets, then that will be much faster recovery than it would have happened in India. So in that sense, I think the banks will stand to gain. The other point which I want to make on extradition is that extradition is for a different reason. You see, if he is found to be having done a criminal act in India, even though he may repay all the debts, he may still be liable in India for fraud, which is punishable under the Indian Penal Code. So extradition would be on those lines, that he is guilty of a criminal offense for which he has to be punished in India. And there's nothing to do with the recovery. Recovery will take place, but in addition, he may still have to face criminal charges.
Right, Mr. Ranina, Mr. Naganand, as well as Mr. Gopal Jain, thank you so much for sharing your perspective on this big development, a huge victory indeed for the banking consortium, which is fighting its case, fighting its battle against Vijay Mallya. They have got a major reprieve from the UK High Court. We'll slip into a short break. Stay tuned to ET Now for more news and updates.